Hi there, I'm Gloria Macarenko. Now this week, our stories are grounded in respect for our roots, from gardening to cooking to learning the history of the land. This is Our Vancouver. Coming up, African traditions and a love of plant-based food are bringing people together. And hot weather tips to get the best growth out of your patch of soil. But first, play tourist in the city by exploring the stories of Stanley Park. Well, Stanley Park is a beautiful place to go for a walk on a hot, sunny day. Its traditional Indigenous name is Kwai, and there are many stories from the park that most of us don't even know. Well, our next guest shares that history with a walking tour that you can go on now. Will Woods is the founder and chief storyteller of Forbidden Vancouver. Will, hello there.
Hello, Gloria. How are you doing?
I am doing well, thank you. I hope you're having a good summer so far. This is so interesting. I know you have uncovered so many stories about Stanley Park already. So let's start with, how did it come to be in the first place?
Well, I get that question quite a lot from people about, how did this tour come about? And it's been going for about 4 or 5 years. We already had a number of other walking tours we've been doing for longer than that. And I'd actually thought for a while that Stanley Park always fascinated me because I had this sort of burning question of, like, why is there this giant park here? Like, we have, it's right by downtown, and what were the decisions made that led to this huge park being established? And it seemed quite strange to me that we had such a large park right on the edge of downtown, and that was probably prompted in some part. It was part of my, like many people, I'd go for a jog every week in Stanley Park and ruminate to myself on that. And I guess that intersected with wanting to have a walking tour in which we shared some of the stories of some of the incredible Indigenous people that we have locally or have been alive, in the past. And often our walking tours, might be in Gastown. We talk more about settlers, for example, and we thought, well, maybe Stanley Park's the perfect place to share some more of those Indigenous stories that from people who lived in the park or who live nearby or had some connection to it.
Well, and how was it decided that we have this giant park right next to a big city?
Well, I think there's this kind of myth that we have that Stanley Park is this untouched wilderness that was the city forefathers deemed to turn into a park right around the city's foundation. We've all benefited from it ever since. And I guess there's sort of like an element of truth in that, but I think a more accurate representation would be that, and this won't be a surprise, I think, to anyone watching this show, that it really comes down to a giant real estate deal that the Canadian Pacific Railway had as part of bringing the terminus of its railway station to Gastown, where Waterfront Station is today, of course. It had this real estate scheme where it was given or granted huge tracts of land in what would become the West End and Shaughnessy, and they would sell off that land and make themselves a fortune doing it. There was this undeveloped land that was, I suppose, the peninsula of downtown that had been made a military reserve and was owned by the federal government and had been for quite a long time up to this point. And the CPR was worried that the federal government would sell that land to developers, and the value of the CPR's land holdings in the West End and Shaughnessy would go down as a result of this this land right on the waterfront, right where Stanley Park is today, would be even more valuable, and they wanted to protect the value of their assets. And of course, having a giant park right next to the West End would only help with West End real estate values anyway. So it just so happened that many CPR officials were on the City of Vancouver Council at that time. They petitioned the federal government and said, well, can we lease this land and make it into a park? And the federal government said, okay. And here we are now, over 130 years later.
There's the overall beauty of the park itself, but then there's all the different areas of the park. The picturesque meeting place like Lumberman's Arch. What used to be there before?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And Lumberman's Arch, that large field there That was the site of the largest indigenous village in the park, which I've heard different pronunciations, Woi Woi, Shui Shui, and how it's pronounced. And there were many families living there. And once the park had been, I guess that agreement had been formalized to turn it into a park, City Council quickly moved to evict by force, really, indigenous people who were living there in a number of different village sites, but certainly Shui Shui was the largest. And the mechanism they used to do this was the building the Park Road, which of course is still there today. And the planned route for the Park Road went right through the buildings of this village. And one day, the road builders turned up and said to the families living there, "Hey, you have to go because we're building the road here tomorrow." And so they were forced to leave.
So what would you say have been the efforts to better reflect Indigenous history in the park, more recently?
There's been a couple of really fantastic, in the last 10 or 12 years, a couple of really fantastic examples of that. One is the Rose Cole Yelton Memorial Totem at Brockton Point. And many of those totems are from northern BC, but there's a number from local nations now. And in 2009, a carver named Robert Yelton, who was the son of Rose Cole Yelton, worked with a number of other carvers to have that totem carved and placed there on the site that was Rose Cole Yelton's home for many years. And she was actually the last, she didn't live there her entire life, she left, but she was the last person, the last remaining resident, and she died in 2002. So that's a really great totem to visit, and there's a plaque there with lots of information about that on there. And the other installation is a fabulous bronze sculpture by an artist called Luke Marston that's also at Brockton Point called Shore to Shore. And it depicts one of the families that made Brockton Point their home. It was a Portuguese man named Portuguese Joe Silvey, and he had two wives. One of them passed away, sadly, and he remarried, and his second wife is also depicted, so the three of them depicted on this bronze statue. And they were called Kwahama and Kultinats, those two women. That's well worth a visit. It's a fantastic sculpture. It also has some Portuguese tile work at the base as well. So it really brings together the different influences that made that place home for so many people for so long.
Well, so many stories, Will. And I understand last month you donated 10% of the ticket sales for all of your walking tours to the Indian Residential School Survivors Society. Why did you feel that was important?
Well, like everyone, we were so disturbed by the finding in Kamloops and the subsequent findings that have happened. And we take our responsibility seriously to try and share histories of Vancouver, the good and the bad, or some of those histories can be painful to hear. And we don't want to try and hide talking about important histories from our city just because they can be difficult to listen to. And I don't see myself and my guys don't see ourselves as being there to share Indigenous legends or to talk on behalf of Indigenous people. That's absolutely not what we're doing. And there is a walking tour company that does do walks in the park called Talisay Tours, who are Indigenous owned and have Indigenous guides. So we see our role as to talk about some of the incredible Indigenous people that have lived and whose lives have touched Stanley Park, and talk about the histories of what happened to the people in the park. We felt a real responsibility once we heard those stories to try and make a tangible, I guess, try and make some sort of contribution to try and help heal some of the pain that the residential school system has caused and continues to cause. And we felt like a financial contribution was the right thing to do, and hopefully does have some benefit.
Well, thank you very much for this window into a little bit of the history of this neck of the woods, literally. Nice to talk to you today.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, my name is Elena.
My name is Vachesh, and
this
this
is
is our
our
Vancouver.
All right, it's time for one of our favorite features. This is where we get to showcase a number of the photographs sent in by you, our audience, so thank you. And as so many of us are traveling through the province, we are province-wide today. Marty Pollock is a truck driver. His job takes him to many beautiful spots in BC, including this one. This is Nicola Lake, just outside of Merritt. Thank you, Marty, for sending us that stunning image. Sarah Wood sends us this sunset moment from Salmon Arm. Oh, it's so peaceful and beautiful. Thank you, Sarah. And look at this lovely shadow of a kiss at sunset in Penticton along the lake. Just adorable. Thank you so much to Michelle Young for taking the time to send that one to us. It's easy. Just send us more when you're out and about with your camera. Email some of your favorite photographs to us, bcphotos@cbc.ca. bcphotos@cbc.ca. So you have planted your seeds, you've got your gardening tools, but have you considered covering your soil? Vancouver horticulturalist Christina Chung explains why you should and how to do it.
Hi, I'm Christina Chung and I'm a horticulturist here in rainy Vancouver. Today we're in my garden and I want to show you something that's super beneficial that many gardeners don't think about. Even before we enter the prime growing season, we as gardeners have probably thought about how to give our plants the best chance at success. We tend to our seedlings or buy the healthiest plants and also make sure we have supplies and tools on hand for the growing season. But did you know that there's one item that oftentimes doesn't make it onto the checklist? I'm talking about covering the soil, and it could be with mulch or with living plants, just something that acts as a blanket on top of the soil surface.
A light physical barrier on top of the garden beds and containers not only helps lessen the evaporation from the soil in the hotter months, it also prevents erosion from wind, water, like during heavy rains or when we overhead water, and also compaction from our feet.
Another huge benefit is weed suppression. So this beautiful dense mat of creeping thyme prevented weed seeds from landing and germinating. I don't have to do any weeding here, which is great. This adjacent area had exposed soil. Weed seeds landed, germinated, and now I have a lot of weeding to do. Have you ever tried to water a thirsty plant in your garden bed or a container and noticed the water sliding right off of the surface? If so, then you may need to look into mulching.
There's likely a dry crust on top of the soil, which is preventing the water from actually infiltrating or entering the soil and reaching your plant's roots. And this is not good. One simple way to prevent this is by mulching or growing ground covers so that the crust doesn't form.
So what are some options for covering the soil? Well, one of the more common, effective, and free types of mulch are leaves.
If you have access to leaves, collect them and use them.
Straw is a wonderful material and it's used a lot in food gardens. It's a lightweight material that's perfect for working around the base of crops. Now with all of these loose materials, you have to keep in mind that you want to create the blanket on top of the soil. You don't want to mix it into the actual soil.
Low-growing perennials like creeping thymes, sedum, strawberry, ajuga, and other ground-hugging plants make excellent covers. You can even design a patchwork, all knitted together, over time to suppress the weeds and also add a lot of interest and beauty to your garden.
If you're a food gardener, and especially if you garden in containers, here's a really fun, easy, and simple way to grow your edible ground cover. Just sow a whole bunch of baby greens like this kale and mustard here. For me, these are a bit too big. I'm going to harvest them and then sprinkle a new layer of seeds. They're going to germinate really quickly, and within 2 weeks, I'm going to get a new layer of edible ground cover. So when would you apply mulch? Anytime, really. But if you're planting plants into your garden right now, you can mulch with something quick like leaves, so you can start getting the benefits of covering your soil.
Just make sure to leave an inch or so around the base of the plant.
So what if you just sowed a whole bunch of springtime veggies like greens and carrots? Instead of smothering the emerging seedlings, wait until they actually peek out of the soil and then apply the mulch around the base, like what I did with these carrots. In our climate, there's always a window of opportunity to introduce new plants into the garden, including perennial ground covers like this beautiful creeping thyme. Remember, with that protective blanket on top of the soil, you'll see fewer weeds, happier, more hydrated plants, less erosion from the wind and the rain, and also beauty if you opt for perennial plants. Thanks for joining me in my garden today, and happy gardening.
Sure, it may not be spring anymore, but the CBC has been capturing timeless scenes of nature under the banner Hello Spring. And what better way to cool off from the summer heat than diving underwater to see BC's kelp forests? Just watch. Coming up, the full summer forecast with Johanna Wagstaffe.
The 2021 summer season will be going down in the history books for Canada, and not in a good way. Lytton, BC set 3 back-to-back national temp records, landing on 49.6, setting the stage for the wildfire tragedy that took place the next day. The heat was astonishing. Vancouver Airport, usually much cooler given its location by the water, surpassed 30 degrees 3 days in a row. Simon Fraser University broke a national low temperature record for not dipping below 29 degrees. Abbotsford felt like 50 with the humidex, and Jasper broke 4 consecutive provincial temp records with highs in the 40s. Fort Smith in the Northwest Territories, warmest temperature north of 60 degrees at 39.9. After a start to the season like that, we're going to need all the help we can get when it comes to clues for the season ahead. Human-caused climate change will continue to make long-range forecasting difficult with the shifting baselines, but for the most part, our long-range models are suggesting that most of Canada will see near normal or above normal temperatures. In fact, at first glance, Environment Canada's July, August, and September outlook is shockingly red. The darker the red, the higher confidence in a warmer than normal season. This does mean a higher likelihood of continued drought and wildfire conditions for Western Canada. And with that comes the risk of poor air quality, especially later in the season. Southern Ontario and Quebec may see a more active jet stream, which means some cooler weather between rounds of summer heat. And for the East Coast, temperatures are also looking above seasonal. With an active hurricane season called for by the Canadian Hurricane Centre, Atlantic Canada could be looking at a few more stormy days than usual. And ocean water continues to run several degrees warmer than normal. So any storm system may tap into that Atlantic moisture and have a higher potential to bring more rainfall at times. Northern Canada may also be looking at a warm and stormy season with that active jet stream. And while averages in a season will always be made up of highs and lows, our forecast is fitting into the global pattern as well. 2021 is already coming in hot and will likely end up in at least the top 8 hottest years on record for planet Earth. Johanna Wagstaffe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Johanna, thanks very much. You are watching Our Vancouver. I'm Gloria Makarenko. Now, when the weather is warm, why not enjoy it with some delicious food at an Afro-vegan cookout? 3 groups recently came together to put it on: Kula Kitchen, Coho Collective, and Elbow Patties. And joining us now from the Coho Collective boardroom is Asha Wheeldon, vegan chef and founder of Kula Foods. Asha, hello there.
Hello, how are you?
I am doing really well, thank you. So just what is the whole idea behind Kula Kitchen?
So Kula Kitchen produces plant-based food, and a lot of our inspiration draws from Afrocentric flavors. So in terms of region, I would say East African mostly. And we play up with some of the foods we love here as well. I personally I grew up in Kenya, and so I draw a lot of inspiration from food that I enjoy both in Kenya as well as Toronto.
Okay, so what kinds of food? Can you show us?
Yeah, so today this is kind of like a fusion of more of like the Southern food as well. So I have one of our pepper sauces it's called Pili Pili, and the flavors have heat, but also we use spices like barbare, which is a very popular spice that you can find in Ethiopia, as well as it's just a staple in my family's cooking. And so we incorporate that into some of our meals and packaged foods, including stews. And so we started this 3 years ago, and our goal was to, kind of tell the stories of food from various regions and kind of mesh it together with some of the food that I've enjoyed here in Vancouver, as well as Toronto. So Afro-Caribbean is really where we're centered, and it's all plant-based. And so today, for example, we have from Elbow Patties, who we recently collaborated with on the barbecue pop-up. And so this is the Jamaican patty. I think the flavors we have today is the mushroom, which is so popular. And so, yeah, Kula tells that story, and we use different spices and flavors to pull in. So I'm excited to share that today.
Oh, my
how we do
mouth
that.
is watering already, I have to tell you. But what are you going to put together for us?
Okay, all right. So we'll start with the main, which is the chicken. And so we have our, these are soy curls based. We'll go ahead and just get a little messy.
That's the most fun part, don't you think? Getting
Yes,
a little bit
it is.
messy in the process?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a messy one. Really fun. So you kind of get a sweetness and a bit of spice from this option. And then we have our coleslaw, which is just like a medley of vegetables, including cabbage and carrots.
For that little bit of a tart crunch, huh?
Yes, yes. Just a little balance there. And then adding a bit of heat with, we'll put them here, our jalapenos. Yes. Take a bite of that, and it's nice and crispy. It's a nice little balance. And then we top it off with pickles. It's a nice slice of pickles just on top.
I'm just trying to
And that is
imagine
it.
all of those flavors melding in one beautiful
And that's
bite.
what we have. That's what we have here. Yeah, this is a definite popular item. And the Brioche Vine is made with a local company called Flower Girl Baking. And I'm placing it in one of our reusables with, again, a collaborative effort with a company called Reusables. So this is some ways that our folks can find our meals delivered and picked up.
Oh, that looks fantastic. So you've just come off this cookout event. Have you got any other events planned?
We do. We have a cooking series coming up with elbow patties, and our goal is to both virtually and in person start creating events that allows to share a lot of our plant-based recipes, but also just a moment to sit down and talk and share stories throughout Vancouver area. And we're going to be inviting chefs and the foodies in the Vancouver area to join us in this. And so the first one is tentatively set up for July 24th, and we'll be continuing on a monthly basis.
Nice. Now, if people can't get out to your events in person, any other way we can order your food?
Yes, you can order online at our website at coolakitchen.ca through third-party order systems. And we do partner with local retailers to carry some of our meats. So, for example, this is perfect time for summertime to have any of our rib bites, barbecue chicken that I just demonstrated today. So we do a lot of collaborations. You can find us at Coho Coffee, where I'm at right now, the collective, and pop-ups, like keeping track of us through social. We do like to share that. So many ways that you can find us. So through our partners, ourselves, and mostly through Coho.
That sounds amazing. And thank you so much for whetting our appetites to your beautiful, beautiful food. Have a great summer.
You as well. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Darlene.
And my name is Gordon.
And my name is Eleanor.
And this is our Vancouver.
Many events have been canceled or have gone online during the pandemic, and some of this year's Dancing on the Edge festival is online. But with loosened COVID restrictions, there will also be some live performances. Kirsten Wickland and Peter Smida each have their own separate event, but they also appear together in the film Prominence and Glory. You can also see the group Immigrant Lessons perform live. These will be at the Fire Hall Arts Center. For more information on all the performances, go to dancingontheedge.org. And Happenings for a Small Stage is back every Friday at Memorial Peace Park in Maple Ridge. On July 30th, Award-winning singer Sade Awele is going to be performing with the Afro soul collective Serengeti, followed by African gospel singer Gentil Miss. For more information, search Happenings for a Small Stage on mapleridge.ca.
Hey, it's Grant Lawrence here with massive news about CBC Music's Toyota Searchlight 2021. After going through thousands of original song entries and thousands of your votes, we narrowed it down to a top 10, and now our judges have spoken. The winners of Searchlight 2021 have been announced. And yes, I said winners. This year, unlike any other, we have 1 grand prize and 4 runners-up. So before we get you to your first place Searchlight champ, here are your 2021 runners-up in alphabetical order. There you go. Those are our 4 Searchlight runners-up for 2021. Congratulations to them all. They have each won a Toyota Searchlight prize pack that includes global distribution deals for their songs from Play MPE. Plus, they have each won $1,000 worth of studio time and $500 worth of new musical instruments and more. So, who is our grand prize winner of CBC Music's Toyota Searchlight 2021? Check it out.
I gave up friendships, I did some things I'm afraid to mention, but every year that I do not get it, I dig deeper into self-destruction, yeah. There are a million better ways that I can handle things, but I would rather drink and spiral till I don't know what's real, go numb to the things that I feel. Oh, I go down.
Oh yeah, there you go. That is Jive. He is from Scarborough, Ontario, an amazing R&B artist who is actually a former Juno nominee in the R&B and soul category. And now he's poised to bust out even bigger. For winning Searchlight 2021, Jive has won a placement in the Alan Slate Juno Masterclass in Toronto, a recording residency at the Studio Bell in the National Music Centre in Calgary, a Play MPE global distribution deal for his song, and a Toyota Searchlight prize pack of $5,000 worth of more studio time and more new instruments. Congratulations to Jive and all of our runners-up. It has been an amazing year. Find out more about our winners at cbc.ca/searchlight. I'm Grant Lawrence. I'll check in with you again soon.
Coming up, quenching thirst and cooling down with some traditional Indian summer drinks. You are watching Our Vancouver. I'm Gloria Macarenko. Now, July has certainly been hotter than usual. The weather has had many of us seeking ways to cool down. And the CBC's Benit Brioche offers a few tasty suggestions.
So it's a hot day. a sweltering day, and you need a solution to cool down. I have one. Well, 3. You see, growing up in Jubbi, these were the cold drinks myself, my family, those around India, and neighboring countries sip for the summers. And we even enjoy them here in Canada. I'm Benit Brach with CBC News, and I'm going to share with you my go-to cold drinks. The go-to drink is ruafza. It's a pink drink made from rose syrup, and it literally means soul refresher in Urdu. You can buy the syrup from most Indian supermarkets or even online. Start by adding the syrup. Now, some water, milk, and ice. Give it a stir. And let's top it off with some extra syrup and ground pistachios. The next drink is made with cardamom syrup, and it's called ilachi sharbat. It's not as popular as the rose one, but it's made similarly. This is another syrup you can commonly find in Indian supermarkets. Add the green syrup. Water is optional, so I decided to add milk. Next, add ice and stir. And garnish with ground pistachios and almonds. Lastly, we have mango lassi. Lassi is a yogurt or buttermilk-based drink that's very popular in North India. Usually the common way to have lassi is plain, but let's face it, mangoes are great. Start with some fresh sliced mango. Next, add milk or almond milk, plain yogurt. Low fat is recommended for the right consistency, and then blend. Now we add in some ice and serve chilled. And there you have it. If you have any unique recipes that help you cool down, let us know.
Benit, thank you very much. Those look absolutely delicious. Now, last month was Filipino Heritage Month. CBC Vancouver celebrated with a number of stories, including this personal question asked by our own video journalist, Gianpaolo Mendoza. And he wondered, what is in a name? And the answer is a lesson in Filipino history.
Filipinos are known for having some very unique, and some might say unusual first names and nicknames. For example, my name is Gianpaolo, but most people call me GP. It's easy to see how I got my nickname. It's just the first 2 letters of John and Paolo. For some other Filipinos, the story behind their nicknames isn't so straightforward.
So my full name is Mary Ruth. When I was a baby, my cousins would call me Baby Ruth, like the chocolate, because they sound alike. And then my mom decided, you know what, let's change it to MM, like the nickname instead of Baby Ruth, let's change it to MM so it will still be chocolate. And that's how I got MM.
My full name is Annabelle Vega, but then my nickname is Gangging. And it came from Palangganging, which came from the word palangga. So palangga means love in Cebuano.
My full name is Alexandra Lily Ivana Herrera Patargue. I'm called Ali. That's an acronym for Alexandra Lily and Ivana, ALI.
So why are our names so unique? Some of the answers to that question can be found in Filipino culture and the country's colonial history. Let's start with first names. One of the most popular naming traditions in the Philippines has to do with honoring your parents and your family lineage.
Marital union is taken seriously in the Philippines to the point that they'd like to honor that marital union by naming the children or one of the children after the names of the couple who got married. You would really find it surprising that some of these unique names are actually a concoction or combination of the first or any order of syllable from the names of their parents.
So my name is Florita Padilla. My name is a combination of my parents. So the first 4 letters are from my dad. His name is Florentino. And the last 4 are from my mom, so Clarita. So together, Florita.
For many Filipinos, their legal first name isn't usually the one they use in their day-to-day lives. Baby, June, and boy are all common Filipino nicknames, and it can sound a little unusual, especially when you hear them mentioned across different families.
I have an Uncle Boy, I have an Uncle June and a Kuya June. I have an Auntie Baby.
Nicknames are a way to identify people with a sense of endearment and familiarity. So it's very common for Filipino fathers to name their one of their sons Junior. Junior might become June, then an endearment would be Junjun, and from Junjun becomes Junji, or Junjing, or Jingjing, or Jing, right? And the repetition of syllables in Philippine naming practices is really a sign of cuteness as well as endearment.
Many of the surnames Filipinos have today can be traced back to one of the most influential laws in the country's colonial history, the Claveria Decree. This provided a list of 61,000 surnames, the majority of them Hispanic, that every Filipino family would have to choose under Spanish rule, mainly for tax, census, and religious purposes. The document would define the names of Filipinos for generations, while leaving behind many of the country's diverse indigenous surnames.
Part of the reason why the Spaniards wanted to systematize the registry of surnames is because the indigenous practice of siblings in the Philippines was to adopt different surnames for each sibling. So every sibling can adopt the surname that they wanted, again based on different characteristics, right? Like Maambong, which means graceful, or a debonair, which is originally from the Visayan, or Mababang Loob, which means humble in Tagalog, or Mabanglo, which means sweet-smelling. And so for colonial administrators, it's going to be a nightmare, right? If they know you come from the same family, but you're adopting different names based on your personal preference. And so with the Claveria Decree, the 61,000 surnames would now be the basis from which the eldest member of the family can choose what is the surname for their clan. And so many Filipinos chose religious surnames. So you have so many De La Cruz from the cross, De Jesus from Jesus, Del Rosario from the rosary. Even my own ancestors chose the name Angeles, which means angels.
The bottom line is Filipino names have centuries of culture and history written into them. Some might say our names are a little unconventional, but most would probably tell you they reflect the spirit of creativity that defines Filipino culture. For CBC News, I'm John Paulo, or, depending on who you ask, GP Mendoza.
Coming up, we've got another story about Filipino culture and what it has in common with Canada's Indigenous history. Hi, welcome back to Our Vancouver. I'm Gloria Macarenko. Now, June was Filipino Heritage Month. It was also National Indigenous History Month, and both groups experienced trauma from colonization. The CBC's Michelle Elliott shows us how Filipinos are showing their solidarity.
This is Mandy Nahaney and Babette Santos. They've been friends and are working to share each other's indigenous cultures for 2 decades. Nahaney is singing Snowbird by Cecilia, a Squamish matriarch. Nahaney is from the Squamish and Nisga'a nations. Santos is dancing a traditional Bagobo Tagabawa dance from the Philippines, and they are second-generation Filipinx of mixed heritage. Santos is working to promote indigenous cultures from the Philippines. But Filipino Canadians aren't always aware or interested in their indigenous roots, as they have diminished over centuries of colonization. They hope more Filipinos will reconnect with those roots and, in turn, make a connection with indigenous peoples in Canada.
For me, it's all about understanding the roots of indigenous identity in the Philippines is a journey towards knowing more about myself. Because if we go back six generations, we have indigenous blood, and it's hard to accept it. And who am I going to accept that more with Mandy, who's been decolonizing for a long time?
Many Filipinos are calling on each other to support indigenous people in Canada. Beth Dolyaga says Filipinos, many of whom are Catholic due to Spanish colonization, must support survivors of residential schools.
It's not just asking for the church as an institution for an apology, but also to indemnify families and survivors of these residential schools. And we have to stand with them.
As Filipinos, we understand the concept of being thankful and appreciation for what we have. And part of that is recognizing the privileges we have as settlers on Indigenous land.
Bob Joseph provides training on Indigenous relations. He says Filipinos and others can take specific first steps.
You could go and find the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action and just have a read through there. And personally, look for one that fits yourself, and then do that little bit of work where we are taking the time to learn about the history and the culture and the UN Declaration, and then involve your church groups and your places of business, your government organization. Those would be helpful things to do.
You were on that sea bus. Good to see you.
For Nahaney, it means working together in meaningful ways and actively involving Indigenous people in events and gatherings, making friendships, and finding a common bond. With Santos, the shared elements of their Indigenous cultures, like the significance of the canoe, or in Tagalog, bangka, are a source of connection.
And that's what I really love about this relationship, is that it's like we're constantly trying to figure out, how can we go further? How can we go further? How can we do more together? In the same canoe, yeah.
Isang bangka. Isang bangka.
Isang bangka.
Bangka.
Michelle Elliott, CBC News, on the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
When we bring you the day's stories here at CBC Vancouver, award-winning staff photographer Ben Nelms is often there to capture the images that say so much. Here are some of the scenes he saw through his camera lens this week. And that's all for our Vancouver for this week. I hope you can join me weekday afternoons on CBC Radio 1 for On the Coast. Goodbye for now.